Most of us never voted for a Democrat in our lives. Never thought about it. Because most of us are lifelong Republicans. But we're Americans first. We understand the character and experience and frankly, the empathy required for leadership. Because we've seen it firsthand when we all served with the 43rd president. But come election day, every last one of us on this team is voting for Biden. Let's put Joe Biden in the White House. He'll be a solid 46.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our latest webinar from 43 Alumni for Biden. My name is John Farner with the organizing committee for 43 Alumni for Biden. We have a great panel. I'm surrounded by people here, Brady Bunch style, on today's webinar, and we're happy to be co-hosted today with the National Security Leaders for Biden group. And we're very excited to have a good conversation with our two special guests, Jim Glassman and Joe Collins, Dr. Joe Collins. Both former national security leaders themselves, both focused on integrity, and we look forward greatly to have strong conversations with them. Similar to our last webinars, we really want to make this as interactive as possible and answer any questions you may have for any one of the panelists that we have with you today. So if you want to do that, go ahead and either use the chat function or the Q&A function. Either one of those will come up to any one of us, and then we can funnel them into Jim and Joe or anybody else on the panel as well. Before we get started, though, I want to go around the room here and introduce folks and why they are here. We have David Almasi with 43 Alumni for Biden on the organizing committee with myself, as well as Serenity Hanley. And I'm looking forward for you guys to actually meet Serenity. And so you're going to put a face to a lot of the social media posts you put out. So I'm looking forward to her saying a couple of words. Steve Brock, who's with National Security Leaders for Biden, is with us. And then both Jim Glassman and Joe Collins. And we'll get to those folks in a second. But first, let me throw it off to David first. So David, go ahead.
Thank you, John. I like that you pointed to the side and it's where I am on the screen.
I know. Well, I'm trying. I don't know. Yeah.
So thanks everyone for joining. Wanted to introduce Serenity. So one of the things that we did in the very beginning is we knew that if we wanted to be successful when we created this group, is that we were going to have a strong digital presence. And I was honored to work for President Bush as the White House Internet Director, and Serenity actually succeeded me when I left in the second term. And so when we were pulling our group together, we were thrilled to reunite. So through Serenity and Michael Turk and Heather Michaelgard and Eric Livingston, who helps us with some of our emails, we pulled together a really strong, crack team. But Serenity has been fantastic for us and has been really spearheading and driving all the social media content, and the creativity that she brings to that has just really kind of helped us complete that mission in terms of how we're interacting and engaging, not only with alumni, but those people that we're trying to reach and other like-minded organizations like the National Security Leaders for Biden. So with that, I just was gonna throw it off to Serenity and tell us a little bit about what she's been doing over the past couple months and what we can be doing here in the final push.
Thanks, Dave. This is me, Serenity. I am the person that taps out a lot of those tweets that you see and on Facebook and Instagram as well. And I couldn't do this without our entire team. Because it is a huge undertaking. So yeah, Dave, thank you so much for your leadership, and Heather and Michael and Eric. You know, it's a full team, and we all rely on each other to make it work. But as Dave was saying at the very beginning, you know, we wanted to make sure that we had a strong presence and that we were seen as a legitimate group. And that legitimacy came organically especially through Twitter. We were able to kind of figure out our message and then stick to it throughout the entire election, or the period that we've been involved. And that is to represent, to elect Joe Biden and to put ourselves in a position where we sounded like he was the president already. So we wanted to portray him in that way. We didn't want to get involved in issues because we have one goal, and that's what brings us all together, is to elect Joe Biden. And it's been a wonderful experience. I've really enjoyed it. I mean, this organizing committee has been amazing. And Karen Kirksey, she's been fantastic. She's had her eye on on that ball, and she's kept us right in line. So that's it. You know, I just try to make it fun. Our little tips every day. I didn't realize how intense that would be for 115 days, but Heather's been amazing helping out with that as well.
And the one thing I'll add is that, as Trendy said, most of it's been organic, you know, particularly on Twitter. We haven't done any advertising politically on Twitter, and the only promotions we've done so far is over the past week for the ad that we just saw at the very beginning of this call. And so we've got news about other things coming on that, but you know, Facebook and Google has been our primary promotion, primary source of promotion on those platforms. But the organic growth over, what is it, 38,000 Twitter followers and
38.8. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, crazy in just a couple of months, in just 4 months. So we hope to see that grow, and we appreciate all of you who've retweeted and helped spread our message as well, because we couldn't have done it without you. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Having everyone else, you know, kind of work together and help support each other and amplify each other's message has really been helpful as well.
David, I'm going to have you kick things off to ask Ambassador Glassman a question. But first, I want to introduce Steve Brock. Steve, can you talk a little bit about the National Security Leaders for Biden, what your organization is, how you came about, before we get into the depths of the conversation with our two main guests here?
I sure can. Thanks so much. And thank you for everything that 43 Alumni for Biden has done for us on our Twitter journey. You're a great partner, and you've helped us grow. This Friday is our 4-month anniversary of being on Twitter since our first follower, and you guys have really helped us grow and sort of cross-pollinate into your awesome following too. So thank you for that. National Security Leaders for Biden came about a couple weeks after Super Tuesday, and it's very unique. You know, never before has there been sort of a capability and an organization for a group of what started off as retired senior military officers to get involved in a presidential campaign. And so we approached the Biden campaign about it. You know, they thought it was a good idea, first thing to try in this election cycle, and we went ahead and did it. And the group has rapidly grown from just, you know, less than 100 folks back in the April-May timeframe to over 780 right now. Is made up of retired generals, admirals, ambassadors, senior national security officials, folks that have worked in the White House. It is made up of senior people that have worked in national security type of issues at the state level for governors. It's made up of independents, Democrats, Republicans. It's just this amazing group of people that have all come together, national security wise, even folks that were prominent in the intelligence community who had never before kind of gotten involved in electoral politics, have come forward to voice our strong support for Joe Biden as what we really need to secure the nation and go away from the sort of the precarious state that we're in that regard right now with President Trump. So the group is, like I said, been recognized by Vice President, our Vice Presidential nominee, Kamala Harris, in the last debate. We rolled out again just yesterday with another 290 prominent members. And what we've mainly done is worked very closely in the states. We have state teams in all the battleground states. We've done a lot of strategic messaging, both with videos, surrogacy, and op-eds. We've done 150 op-eds in the last 4 months in the battlegrounds. And we're also now turning towards get out the vote. So thanks so much for having us.
Fantastic. And I'm going to have you introduce Joe in a second, maybe tee up the first question for Joe. But first, David, let's have this be an organic conversation to start out with. Dave, you want to kick things off?
Absolutely. Well, first, I'm thrilled that Jim Glassman is with us. So for those who have been following his career over the years from television, I actually had the honor of working with Jim back in the day when we operated a little website called Tech Central Station, and got to work with him on that for a number of years. And then, of course, he went on to serve as Undersecretary of State in the Bush administration for public diplomacy and public affairs, and then had the honor of being the founding director of the founding executive director of the George W. Bush Institute down in Dallas, Texas. And so when I saw that Jim's name had been added to the former Republican national security officials for Biden, I reached out and we reconnected and talked about ways that we could potentially work together. So Jim, we're thrilled to have you on the call. Thank you for being here. And I guess I would just start off by asking you, why did you decide to get involved and why did you decide to be vocal in this cycle?
I think that any of us who worked for President Bush understand the importance of integrity, leadership, humanity, and that is what is missing here, among many other things. But that's something that I certainly recognized during the first campaign, and I came out for Biden. I said I was going to vote for Biden in an op-ed in the New York Times. And one thing that I said, and I think this is important for the people who are watching, is, you know, a lot of people don't like Trump. We know that. But a lot of those people are saying, well, I'm just not going to vote, or I'm going to vote for somebody I'm going to write in. Well, let me just tell you that if you have a friend who's going to vote for Trump and you decide that you're not going to vote for Biden, then that's a net gain of 1 vote for Trump. But if you vote for Biden, that's zeroing out that person's vote. So it's very important to do that. And I joined former Republican national security officials for Biden, a terrific group that was started by John Bellinger, with whom I worked at State, and Ken Weinstein. And we've done a lot of work. Steve has done fabulous work. There's some overlap between the two groups. I think we've now run about 24 full-page ads in newspapers across the country, including the Wall Street Journal. And you know, the story is that there are lots of people who served in Republican administrations, including the Bush administration, Bush 41, Bush 43, Reagan, and Trump, who are supporting Joe Biden. And to my knowledge, there's not a single equivalent person, maybe there are 1 or 2, I haven't found them, on the Democratic side who are supporting Trump. This is a tremendously important election. And I believe that when you're voting for public officials, integrity is the beginning. Integrity is the baseline. If you don't have that, you don't want to vote for that particular official. And what we've seen over the last 4 years is what a lack of integrity does. And I just want to quote, Joe was saying something about my career as somebody who writes about the stock market, which is a very small part of my career. But I want to quote Warren Buffett, because I think it's one of the best quotes about integrity that there is. He said, in looking for people to hire, you look for 3 qualities: integrity, intelligence, and energy. And if you don't have the first, the other 2, that is to say, intelligence and energy, will kill you. And you think about it, it's true. If you hire somebody without integrity, you really want them to be dumb and lazy. Now, unfortunately, we've got a president who's very energetic. Here's a guy who just, who had COVID, and he's out. He's out doing campaigning, and I have to say, he's kind of intelligent. Maybe he's also lazy, but I think that's the worst possible combination: a person with no integrity, and that's a tremendous contrast with President Bush and with Vice President, I hope, President Biden.
It's fantastic. Appreciate that. And Steve, I'll throw it off to you first. Do you want to introduce Joe? I'd be more happy to do so, but he's, being part of the national security for Biden. I've spoken with Joe for about 10 minutes total right now. I'm already in awe of his experience, the National War College, DoD, but I'll throw it off to you first. You're going to tee up a question and then kind of go into a conversation after that.
Great. Yeah, we were first introduced to Joe by my good friend, Dan Caldwell, who's also a esteemed academic. Joe did a full, great Army career, retired as a colonel. He's headed up the social science department at West Point. He teaches at NDU at the War College. He was a deputy assistant secretary of defense in the Reagan administration. And he, as he'll tell you, he was a lifelong Republican, up until I think last May. So I won't steal any of his thunder. He's got a great story, incredibly compelling, and he's also a great op-ed writer. So I'll turn it over to Joe.
Well, thanks, Steve. Appreciate the kind words. Just a footnote to Jim's excellent pitch on the entire notion of integrity. Vice President Biden, whom I've known, back to the actually to the 1990s and the early 2000s, when we worked on issues having to do with Afghanistan and Iraq. It was a fantastic senator, great talker, great listener, a great person to work across the aisle. Everybody thought that the best person in the Senate was Joe Biden. Yeah, he had the experience, he was caring, he was empathetic, he was competent and ethical. And contrast that with President Trump, who in many ways mocks all of those things. And on top of it is somebody with tremendous character flaws of his own, sexist, racist, a neo-isolationist, and on top of all of that, totally incompetent, as we can see from the COVID situation, and just about, I would say, 8 out of 10 problems in the field of foreign affairs and national security policy. So we can do much better, and Joe Biden is the answer to that problem.
I'm gonna kick this thing off, and we've gotten like 5 questions so far about the same topic, and I'm just gonna throw this out here. There's news that came out yesterday into today about foreign interference on our election from Russia and Iran. Now, I'm gonna qualify this question in the following way: words matter, and words matter and actions matter, both. Sometimes more than others, right? What do you feel the current rhetoric from the president is what effect is it having on this foreign interference? Do you think it's enhancing it? Do you think it's what are your thoughts just overall on the whole thing? Because there's it's like an onion. Once you peel it, there's different layers to it. So, Jim, we'll go to you first, and maybe Joe follow up with that.
Sure. Well, I don't think there's any doubt that the president is not just tacitly, but in many cases, right out loud, encouraging this kind of thing. We have to have a government that is very, very clear that we will not tolerate interference in our elections. And that doesn't just mean the intelligence community alerting us to the fact that this has happened. We need to be proactive and absolutely stop it, put an end to it, and tell the countries that are doing it. Now there's a story that just came out in the Washington Post in the last hour about Iran. We need to tell them that there will be consequences. There is nothing more precious in this country than our system of government, our democracy. And what we're seeing is our adversaries chipping away at it, many cases in really amateurish ways. And we need to have as a major tenet of our policy to put an end to it. And we can do that.
Joe, what do you think?
I think Jim's absolutely right. We still have a lot of questions left over from 2016 on the issue of foreign interference. President Trump's campaign manager, his deputy campaign manager, and his national security advisor all got in legal troubles in relation to the Russians. And 2 of those people are in jail, and the national security advisor's fate still hangs in the balance. And all throughout the Mueller report, the intrusion of Russians in the campaign is tremendous. A dozen Russian intelligence officers were indicted in the Mueller report for crimes that were cyber related. It's a terrible thing. The president doesn't encourage it, but he doesn't avoid it. And like most things, he never lets the rules get in the way of competing for advantage. And unfortunately, he himself has a number of problems vis-a-vis the Russians in particular. And most recently, we found out now that, he owes nearly $500 million to people, most of whom we believe have some kind of foreign connection.
Let me just add, Joe, that imagine that you're Putin or you're a leader in Iran, and you know that one way to get on the good side of this guy of President Trump in a second term, if there is a second term, is by trying to screw up the election. I mean, any foreign government understands that, because he has given a wink and a nod and an encouragement to this kind of activity.
Exactly, and it's an analogous situation with the extreme white and white supremacist groups as well. He is not a supporter, but he's a dog whistler and someone who's willing to seek advantage there, even among the worst characters in our own society.
And Joe, obviously it's not uncommon for a president to maybe not get along with military leaders or to disagree but I think what is unprecedented is the amount of military leaders, both current and former, who have spoken out so, vocally and visibly about their, disdain and their unhappiness and their concern for our country underneath President Trump's leadership. So can you maybe talk to us a little bit about what you and some of the folks in the military, I mean, traditionally they don't weigh in. You see it at State of the Unions that the Joint Chiefs of Staff don't applaud one way or the other, even though when the most amazing things are said that everyone would be agreed with, but they sit silently because they serve the country over any president. But can you talk about why they're so vocal now?
There's been an unprecedented set of incidents. The president, for example, announced the withdrawal from Syria without consulting the Secretary of Defense, caused the Secretary of Defense to resign from his duties. And he tweets people, foreign officers with commands in foreign countries live in fear of the tweet that will come down. He's also interfered with the running of the armed forces. And so there's a tremendous upsurge of people who are uneasy about all of that. One of the things that's really set people in the military off, and General Mattis, Secretary Mattis made a big point of this, was the president's attitude towards our allies. We have an alliance-based strategy. We are the leader of the free world. That is not only a force multiplier for the United States, but it's a tremendous source of legitimacy for us around the world. And he's caused doubt among those people of our commitments, and he's in some ways made our relationship not one of deep and permanent allies, but a relationship that's transactional. And that's driven a lot of folks out. There are more upset military people than I've seen in my career. And I go back into the 1970s. And it is very easy in almost every presidential election of my life for senior military people, active and retired, to just sit back and let the process unfold in front of them. Two excellent people will come up and they will battle for the top spot. And the military, the security services, the intelligence bureaucracies, and our great diplomats are just going to sit there and know that they will be able to work with whoever wins the favor of the Electoral College. We don't have that feeling now, and a lot of people are very upset. And you saw in the national security leaders for Biden, tremendous number of national security officials, 780, and I would say close to half of that were general officers who probably will speak out in only one election of their life. This one. This is about not only about the character of the president, it's about the character of the country. And what kind of country are we going to be? And if Donald Trump has a second term, democracy, a democratic republic, may not survive.
There's a lot of non or apolitical organizations, people, and entities speaking out for the first time and the only time. New England Journal of Medicine, USA Today, Focus on Your Letter. There's a bunch of them. I gotta admit, this is like, I'm overwhelmed with the amount of activity we've gotten on social media and our questions here. I think it's more than we've had like for any of our webinars. So I'm trying to get through as many as possible. However, Joe, in your previous comment, you mentioned, and I want to talk about Trump for a little bit, and then I want to move on to Biden then as well, to kind of shift over to the qualities that Biden brings to the table. You mentioned that the debts that the president currently has to foreign nations and foreign entities. And as news about his finances continues to trickle out via the press or other venues, his accounts in China, his foreign investments are all coming to light. And while I don't really care about other people's finances, I do care when it's a national security implication. So I know you started, why don't we start with you, Joe, because you kind of touched on that, but I want you to kind of expand on those thoughts a little bit.
This is a very unique situation in this administration. We've never had a president who had his own miniature business empire. He was not a big businessman, but he was a very rich person with a very well-to-do small firm that worked for him. And unfortunately, we found when he became president that our ability to make the president separate himself from his ongoing businesses is actually very slight. And so, there have been any number of issues here where the president's ethics have been called into question. One is the emoluments issues. Another is his taxes, and a third is his debt. Jim Glassman, I think this is closer to your beat than to mine. Would you like to weigh in?
I would say there's been an effect, Joe, on policy as well. I mean, certainly there's this great mystery, and we saw it play out at Helsinki and many other times, about what is the president's attitude toward Russia? Why is it so friendly or even fawning? What is the reason for that? And I would also add, by the way, that the president's stance on China has not been very constructive. I mean, he will, blather on about the China virus and say bad things occasionally. But when you look at actual policy, it has not been very tough on China at all. And certainly his trade policies have been far more destructive to the US economy than they have been to the Chinese. So I think in both of those cases, when we see that he has a bank account in China and probably would love to do business there, and when his relationship with the Russians, which we still haven't completely figured out, these are having a real effect on policy. And that is extremely dangerous. Let me say one other thing, Joe. There's so many military people who are supporting Biden that we kind of forget. It is true that the military tends to sit out the upper levels elections. But hey, here's a big surprise. Most military people are actually conservative. So here we are, the one election where we're seeing the military play a role at a high level, retired military. Who are they supporting? They're supporting a Democrat. And why are they supporting it? Because the current president is destroying the values and the democracy, as you say, Joe, that they have sworn to protect, and many of their friends have lost their lives to protect. President Obama just said tonight, I don't know if you saw his speech tonight, which was absolutely fabulous. He said that we need to get values back at the center of American life. And I don't think anybody could say that better. And people who are in national security, including military, understand how important those values are. That's what they're doing. They're fighting them, they're defending them.
And it's not just competence, it's character. Maybe it's character first and foremost. This is a character election. And it's not just about the character of the men who are running for president, but it's also about the character of the country. What kind of country are we, and how are we to behave inside of our own borders and out? Just a news snip today, 545 immigrant or potential immigrant children are now virtually orphaned in the United States. We deported their parents and lost track of them. Can you imagine the trauma on those poor children? Not just to be separated forcefully from their parents, but then to have their parents sent home and leaving them there to their own fate. And sadly, along the way, our incompetent government losing track of people and their dependents. Maybe this is a pretty good reason why when people cross the border improperly, you want to keep families together.
Yeah, and I think it's a strong pivot to go to, because you guys mentioned the character counts, right? And that's a strong component of this election. And more times than not, historical elections are really dependent on domestic policy, more so than foreign policy. Economy, domestic issues seem to reign true. However, this election, our world standing, the standing of the United States globally, I think it has a lot to do with how people think, especially those Republicans who have generally supported Republican candidates for their whole lives and have a tough time voting for Joe Biden. As you guys said, military, those who are strong with national security, tend to vote more on the Republican side. For those of us who, on our group who we're talking to, who may have some concerns with supporting Joe Biden, what is your answer to them? Because the other side says he's in bed with Ukraine, he's in bed with Russia, he's in bed with China, we're going to slip into a communist nation. That's the feedback that we are getting as Republicans supporting Joe Biden. So
Right.
what do you guys say?
Poison is a lot of poisonous propaganda, which on its face is kind of funny. Joe Biden, as a socialist, he's the well-known quantity. He defeated the socialists, the handful of them that there are in the Democratic Party, for the nomination. And to talk about him as a criminal is just, it's just gotten down to sheer calumny. They're making this stuff up, and they're using his family against the president. It's horrid. It really is. And on the other side of the fence, the president and his family have been a model of bad behavior throughout the entire 4 years of this administration. And I don't know how much further we can go. The president has a terrible habit of not learning from either success or failure. And you have to wonder what kind of personality problem makes you, as the great General Russ Honore used to say, stuck on stupid. Because the president consistently works against himself, and in this election has taken sides against arithmetic day after day.
So let me just say, I think this is a good question. I think obviously the calumny that Joe talks about, let's put that aside. Obviously the lies we don't accept, but I think that there are foreign policy positions, and by the way, domestic policy positions that Joe Biden has that I don't share. And I think that our group, the former, such a long name, I'll forget a few words, former Republican national security officials for Biden, I think puts it very well to say that we have differences and we're going to fight those out. But we're not going to do that until after Donald Trump is gone. We can't even have a civil conversation until after Donald Trump was
right.
gone.
So let's touch on that.
The key.
Yeah, let's touch on that real quick, and maybe I'll get Steve involved in the conversation here, because one of the questions that we always get, as as alumni of the George W. Bush administration, is, okay, what comes next? And are you guys talking to the Senate? And are you working down ballot? Are you working to bring the country together in a bipartisan way and have fruitful conversations down the road? So, Steve, why don't you talk a bit about, has your organization talked about that, and maybe Joe and Jim, you guys can chime in to think about, you know, how as Republicans we can, you know, effectively interact with the Biden administration.
So our organization, by definition, is focused on getting Joe Biden elected. And we, you know, indirectly, of course, are, you know, helping many others in other, you know, other races, you know, pursue their goals. But we are singularly focused on getting Joe Biden elected. But we, in fact, since we are independents, Republicans, and Democrats that have all come together, I think just that mere fact is sort of creating an open space for a broader discussion about, you know, how things will occur, you know, in hopefully a transition and in a Biden administration, to bring in all the viewpoints that are reflected in our own organization. I think we're sending, and the campaign is really aware of what we're doing. And they're very, you know, it's sending a strong message to them. And I think you and us and all the others, because the success we're having building bridges ourselves and unifying, you know, all sorts of different folks together ourselves, I think will pave the way for the new administration, God willing, to sort of take that lead and you know, bring others, Republicans, independents, or, you know, all sorts of stripes of different, you know, different folks, you know, into administration to work closely with Congress to sort of, you know, tackle all the great challenges that we have, because there is a strong recognition that there's a great amount of work that needs to be done. But there's also a recognition, I think, that, you know, there's a great opportunity here for us, and shame on us if we don't create the government that we should have as we pick up Humpty Dumpty again. You know, this is not incremental improvements on a Bush 43 or on an Obama administration, where you only have so much you can do because you're inheriting something from a sane administration where things were working pretty well. We have a great opportunity here to kind of create the way that we think things should be, because Trump in a weird way is going to give us a pretty blank slate because of all the damage he's done.
So I think as we look, you know, moving forward towards, you know, obviously we're talking about national security, but also there's some concerns. We're getting some questions about homeland security, things that happen within our borders. And I think both Joe and Jim already spoke to this a little bit, but there is some concern. We got a question from Steve here. It says, on the domestic front, are you concerned about the response of militia groups around the country, and what should happen if Trump loses and they deem the result to be tainted or rigged? And I think, you know, former Homeland Secretary Tom Ridge recently tweeted that, you know, he never imagined that when he was Homeland Secretary, that so many years later that domestic terrorism would rise to the level that it has. So I'm wondering if you all could speak a little bit to that as you kind of look towards the election here in just less than 2 weeks.
I think it's a terrible problem. And I think the FBI is on it. There's a problem on the left, and there's an anarchist problem. I don't know if I don't know if the left wants to claim that, but there's a left problem, there's an anarchist problem, and there's certainly a right-wing militia and right-wing white supremacist problem. And unfortunately, in a number of states, our state laws have gotten to the point where they're crazy. When you see armed groups waltzing through the legislature and the executive offices in full military regalia, as if they were going out on a combat patrol in Baghdad, and they're there in the State House in Michigan, you got to wonder, you know, state laws here are a little bit out of whack. And I think that this has festered for too long. There may be some problems here, but anybody who's listening, the best way to control anybody who doesn't want a peaceful transfer of power in the United States is to have a blue tsunami, a blue wave that turns over the Senate, keeps the House, and puts Joe Biden in as president. And in the meantime, our FBI, which I think has maintained its integrity in the face of tremendous bureaucratic pressure, is going to be able to get a handle on that.
Jim, what do you think?
I agree, and I think that the national security forces of the United States, both at home, both domestic and those that are sometimes deployed in foreign lands, are completely dedicated to the rule of law and to order in this country. And you know, I often say that it's not the things that you expect that cause the problems. It's things you don't expect. And I think there's a lot of expectation that we could get some disturbances as a result of this election. And I think there will be a lot of people who are ready for that. So I absolutely worry about the rise of militia groups and white supremacists in this country. But
and one of the problems
a lot of people
in the White House
is encouraging.
I'm sorry to.
No, go ahead.
One of the problems that from the people in the White House is the continual disrespect for the law in this administration. We saw the president, for the first time in my lifetime, hold major campaign events twice on the White House, using not only military personnel, but also civilian personnel who are flirting with the Hatch Act just to be obeying the orders of the president in such ridiculous endeavors. His senior staff trashes the Hatch Act every day, to include 8 violations alleged to Ivanka Trump in one day. And in any case, total disregard for the law, and that's a tremendously, there'll be tremendous ill effects of that down the way. And, you know, Joe Biden is great working across the aisle. I participated in the study group with him on post-conflict reconstruction, and it was run by he and Senator Lugar and their most immediate staff members. It was just a fantastic learning experience. You could give 3 graduate credits in any university for what we did in those meetings. And that team of senators from both parties and their staff worked hand in glove with all of the experts that came, the military, the State Department, intelligence people, to really further knowledge on that particular subject. And progress was made in the administration of that because of that kind of effort.
Yeah, you know, I just think that a wave of relief will wash over this country when Biden wins. Things will change. You know, we have had peaceful transitions after every president. A lot of people were unhappy after the election of 2000. A lot of people were unhappy 2016, where you had, in both cases, a president who won, who lost the popular vote. Some of that unhappiness was expressed in the right way with peaceful protest. And I would expect the same kind of thing would happen with maybe some exceptions, but I think a wave of relief will flood over the country.
Yeah, I agree completely. I agree completely. And guys, we're at ending time here. So I think what we decided was Serenity and Jacqueline from our organizations are in charge of stopping Russian interference on our social media pages. So if you're in charge of that, working with Jacqueline with NSL, and yeah, I think you guys would be great at that. So all kidding aside, guys, I think, you know, your comments were spot on, and really appreciate your leadership. Both in National Security for Biden as well as 43 Alumni for Biden. I mean, without folks like you stepping out and working with organizations like the one Steve, Serenity, David, and myself, and countless others have put together, it's hopefully we're moving the needle enough to see a Joe Biden administration be inaugurated next January. And I agree, Jim. A wave of relief is going to come over me and my household, definitely, when that happens.
Can I say one last thing, if you don't mind?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So, you know, a lot of the people on this call are, of course, former Republican officials. They're worked in the Bush administration. And it takes a lot of courage to come out publicly. Maybe not so much for me, you know, kind of old. I don't have this gigantic career ahead of me, but a lot of people do. And I just want to thank them for having the courage to do what they've done and stepped out. I don't think anyone should be under the misapprehension that the Democrats in the Biden administration, if they win, are going to embrace everybody in this group and make them, you know, ambassadors or Secretary of Defense. I hope they listen to us.
Mm-hmm.
So it takes some guts, and so I want to thank everybody for doing it.
No, we really appreciate it. And so just a couple of things before we end everything here. Our group, we'd like to do more than just put ads together and hold webinars. We are heading up to Pennsylvania this weekend to do a lit drop. So if you're interested in that, the folks listening in, email us, admin@43alumni for joebiden.com. That email address goes to me, as well as a few others in our organization. Let us know you're interested. We'll send you the information, no problem. And next week, I believe, David, you mentioned a guy by the name of Tom Ridge. We have the unique opportunity on the 27th of October, Tuesday 27th. He is going to be our final guest for our webinar series leading up to the election. So he is not one to have very many media interviews. He's not one to be very public outside of his signing on to letters and his very thoughtful op-ed that he wrote, but he will be joining us for a public conversation about his thoughts on the election, reasons why he stepped out as a former governor, Republican governor, and Secretary of Homeland Security. And I believe he signed the National Security for Biden letter as well, Steve, that's correct?
He did.
I'm really looking forward to having him join us on the 27th, and we're going to be opening up registration for that here shortly. Also during that, we're going to debut our second and final ad as well. You saw the first one at the front end of this webinar. We did debuting that one as well. So guys, looking forward. Can't thank the National Security Leaders for Biden enough for all you are doing. Really appreciate everything that you've done, and wish you well and good luck come a couple weeks from now.
Likewise. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.